I always say to people, look at why a dog is doing something. And if you can give them that, then you've beat the system, because you're not having to go, come and get this piece of chicken when the dog's going, I just really want to chase things right now. You're saying, well, you can chase, come and chase this. And instead of trying to combat against their natural instincts, you start working with their instincts. And that's a really powerful thing to do.
That's our wonderful guest today, the dog trainer, Amelia Steele. You may remember her from our Rehome the Hounds episode, where she talked so compassionately and so gently about retraining dogs with a high prey drive, like foxhounds, but also greyhounds. And she also works with many of these dogs in rescue as well. Amelia is very simply an all-round good friend to our dogs. And that's why I wanted to record this summary episode with her. We are talking about how to enjoy the summer holidays with your dog. And don't worry, Amelia is not going to tell you that you should have started training 6 months ago or something ridiculous like that. Instead, she'll just give us some gentle, upbeat guidance on how to introduce your rescue dog to new things, new animals, new smells, and above all, how to keep things safe and light. Enjoy. Amelia Steele, I'm so excited that you are joining us again after we met for the first time at the Rehome the Hounds event, before that even for the podcast. And I remember at the Rehome the Hounds event, you made friends with the resident foxhound Alfred, who was quite big, and you two sat on the floor on Parliament Square, and he was being your lap dog.
Yes.
So that's made you my favorite dog trainer ever.
Thank you. I always say to people, you will always find me with a dog in my lap that is too big to be in my lap.
So, Amelia, we're talking today about taking your rescue dog on holiday for the first time.
Yes.
And I thought the really bad things that I did in the beginning. So Goldie came to me in March from Romania. I was obviously desperately in love with her. She was just about a year old, and I decided to take her to North Norfolk. We hadn't even done puppy training by that point. I have to say she was on the lead the whole time, but there were a lot of things that I didn't realize she had never seen before. Cows, sheep, sea foam, a lot of things that weren't even on my list, a lot of the things that she could just bark at. But ultimately, I took my rescue dog on holidays 4 weeks after she arrived. 1 out to 10, what is your rating of me as a new rescue dog owner back when? I have to say that was 8 years ago. I have learned a lot since then.
I want to be really nice, but I think I'm probably going to have to give you a 1 or a 2.
I get it.
And I'm so sorry, but I can explain why.
Explain, please. That's why you're here. Tell me all the things I did wrong.
Okay, so when you bring home a new rescue and everything is new to them, especially from overseas, one of the first things we look at is establishing some kind of normality for them so that they can understand, this is what life looks like now, this is my day to day. And more than anything, it helps them to start to regulate their nervous system, because when we first change their environment or we first bring them over from overseas, their baseline levels of adrenaline and cortisol are going to be so high. When they don't have enough time to settle in and get used to this is what life looks like, the first thing that can happen is it skyrockets that adrenaline and cortisol, because all of a sudden there's a big change again. The other thing that can happen is that it really disrupts your ability to show them this is what normal life looks like. So it could very well really drag out that length of time that it takes for them to settle in. So when we look at exposure, and obviously we want to get our dogs out doing these things, but we look at sort of gradual exposure in little bits in safe environments. Adolescents, it's almost harder than having a young puppy or an adult dog,
Yeah.
because if you have an adult dog, they're not obviously going to have those hormonal fluctuations that you would in a 1-year-old dog. But if you have a young puppy, you're still in that spot where they're open to new experiences. They'll take it as it comes. Whereas in that 1-year spot, you kind of have the worst of both, where they're still very much hormonal and they want to go and explore and they want to see things, but they're not open-minded like puppies, so they will perceive new things potentially as threats, or it's a lot scarier when they see new things. So it's definitely a, yeah, 4 weeks in, that's a bold move.
Yeah, I realized that afterwards. I think it's interesting that you're talking about the age, because my previous rescue dog, she was about 3 or 4 when she came to me, and she was found in London. So two of these things that Goldie didn't have, um, with London and being a bit older, and she was always cool as a cucumber. She was just the coolest dog, and I could,
Oh.
I could just go to the beach with her straight away. So if somebody came to you with a proper young puppy, let's say 3 or 4 month old,
Mhm.
also a rescue from overseas, would you give slightly different advice then?
So it's difficult because nowadays I think they just changed the regulation fairly recently so that puppies have to
Yeah.
be 6 months old to travel. And it's actually
Yes.
one of the reasons we were saying that we wanted it to caveat rescues, was because at that 6-month point, they're outside of that socialization window. So normally is around 16 weeks that the cutoff is. It's not fixed. But if you get them a bit earlier, it's very easy to get them out and expose them to things and them just sort of take it in their stride. Whereas these, if you're getting them at 6 months plus, they're already outside of that socialization window. And for some dogs, they will start to experience a fear period around that age as well. So yeah, if you had let's say you went down to your local rescue and you got a puppy like I did at 8 weeks old, then great, you can just get out and show them things and show them the world. And yes, you still have to pace it. You don't want to overwhelm them, but it's not so structured, because they will just be like, I can just get out and experience things, and they're still very open to how the world works, if that makes sense.
It does. That's so sweet. Amelia, when we take the dogs now to a new home, so let's
Mhm.
say a camper van or an Airbnb or somewhere where the dog has never been before, how do you make them comfy? And I also noticed that you have got your puppy crate next to you, and your puppy has done a great job rearranging and redecorating.
He has.
Tell me, how do I introduce a dog to a new home, and how much freedom do I give them to make this space their own?
So I usually say to people, you want to try and implement some level of your normal routine when you go somewhere new. So there's a few different elements to it, because as much as possible, let's say your dog eats breakfast at the same time of day every day, goes for their walks at the same time every day. If you can keep that when you go into a new environment, there's still some level of predictability there. So it's going to be less unsettling for them. The other element is just getting them used to the space that they're in. So as much as possible, I would try and limit the amount of access that they have to a new place. So obviously it depends on where you're staying. If you have a camper van, fine, that's really easy. You've got one space that they have to get used to. If you have, let's say you're renting out a big house in the middle of nowhere, lots of space, lots of big garden, you don't want to just immediately say, well, my dog has free roam of the whole house now, because one, it's somebody's house that they own. It's very easy
Yeah.
for dogs to regress on things like toilet training when they go into a new space like that. So the last thing we want is them sneaking upstairs to go pee, and then you get charged a load of money for damaging
Yeah.
somebody's place. Um, so limiting that space, I always so I have these portable dog stoppers with me. They're just I got them on Etsy, I think. They're just these wooden sort of baby gates that instead of having to fix them to the wall, you can just use it to block spaces off. So that can be quite a useful thing to take with you, so that you're not then having to figure out, well, which doors do I close? How do I keep my dog safe? And you can sort of limit them to specific areas. Sometimes when I'll travel with my dog, if it is a large space, I'll keep them on the lead for a fair amount of time with me so that they can sort of get used to it. I'll follow them around, let them sniff, let them investigate, but I'm also supervising so that they're not, going off and ripping up a carpet in a corner or something. Because
Yeah.
even if your dog is used to your home and they're safe and they're well behaved at home, there's no guarantee that they're not going to go into someone else's house and start deciding that they want to dig up the kitchen floor and things like that. So, as
Right.
much as possible, it's sort of easing them into it, if that makes sense.
You already mentioned the camper van, and I'm currently in Cornwall, and there are so many camper vans arriving here now. And when I look in the windows, at least half of them have dogs in them.
Yes.
Usually right next to the driver. So I'm thinking these dogs are well aware of what's happening. But a first camper van trip, is that quite stressful? Because I imagine the environment constantly changes. You constantly have new neighbors as well. Is there an additional stress factor there?
There definitely could be. I think it really depends on the individual dog, because what you might see is that there is a lot of change. It's a confined space. It's a lot to get used to. But the other thing is that for a lot of dogs, when you go and do a camper van trip, for example, a lot of people are going out into the countryside, they're doing big hikes. Often the dog is having more of a chance to decompress than they would on a normal week. So it really depends on the dog and how they adjust to those things and how they feel about the world around them. Because if let's say, for example, you had a dog that was really reactive in your home, you can't go on your normal walk, they're super reactive. You might find that getting out and going away somewhere like that, where you're in the middle of nowhere, there's loads of space, and you're not as close to your neighbors, and you're not going to the dog park where there's loads of triggers, you might actually find that it gives them a chance to just decompress. And I often find that when I work with reactivity clients, for example, who do take a break from those sort of city stresses, and even if they're living in a village, but they're still, seeing people every day, seeing dogs every day, those are all things that can contribute to worsening behavior. So there is an element of, yes, it could be unsettling because it's a new thing, that it's something to adjust to, but also a lot of the time they are getting extra decompression that they wouldn't normally get. So I guess it really just depends on the individual dog and how they tolerate those changes and how they experience the world. So there's not a sort of hard yes or no answer for that one, unfortunately.
Fair enough. And I remember, or I see it every time when we take our dog Tara back to London. So we are in Cornwall because of Tara, because she's a Podenco. She's got a lot of anxiety, which is very typical of the breed, not just because she's a rescue. And when we come back to London, she easily has a week of so much lower stress levels.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just having a chance for dogs to get out away from the stresses that we get in cities and villages and even, in the countryside, but busy areas, having a chance to just get out and get into nature is so, so helpful for dogs, because it does just give them that chance to be a dog, decompress, their adrenaline and cortisol levels come down. So it can be really, really beneficial for them.
Yeah. So basically every dog needs to go to the beach at least once a year. We need to
Yes,
make it a law. I'm going to write that down.
you
Um,
should.
um, There's one big category of things that we can't train for when we are in town or even in your standard dog school, and that is livestock. In particular, sheep can be a huge problem when you are a dog owner and your dog loves to herd or to chase even. We always have to remind people that it's legal for farmers to shoot dogs that worry livestock. So as a dog,
Yes.
you have never seen these animals before. And as a dog owner, you've never been able to train for this first encounter. What is your advice there?
So I'm going to start with a little anecdote from the first time I took my golden retriever on holiday, because I guess I live sort of semi in the countryside. There's a lot of green space and we see a lot of cows and sheep, but he had never seen a horse before, and it was something that I really struggled to expose him to in early socialization. So the first time I took him away, I stayed in I think it was the Delamere Forest, and we just sort of like had a little cabin kind of thing and took him around the forest, and he saw a horse. And the first thing I did was give this horse as much space as possible, because the first thing that goes through my head is, well, I don't want to chance it. I don't want to throw him right up to a horse. Like, that is not the time for exposure. It's not a chance for, well, I'll see how my dog reacts and then, see how we go. So I gave him as much space as possible, and he still lost his absolute mind at this horse. He just was so freaked out. He pretty much let out what I can only describe as a scream. And thankfully, the ladies on the horses were really lovely. I was like, "I'm so sorry, he's never seen a horse before." And they were like, "It's okay, we can stand here for a minute so that he can get used to them." Which was really kind. What I
Wow.
did not do was march him up to sniff. That's not what we want to do when it comes to livestock, things that we want them to ignore. So, as best as I could, I helped him to regulate himself. So, what that looks like in practice is creating as much space as possible, trying to redirect their focus. So, I had treats on me, so I was trying to scatter treats, just interrupt his focus so it's not all on that one thing, but then giving him a chance to turn back and look so that it's not just, no, no, come away, we don't want to look. It's a chance to have a little look. Then we bring our focus away and just slowly bringing that sort of over arousal down so that they're not really freaking out at it. It's also really fine to reassure dogs in those situations. So a lot of the time, if my dog is scared by something, I will talk them through it, which is funny because culturally we're told not to do that, but it's really helpful because dogs will look to us for how they should feel. So just it's okay, good job, no worries, it's all good, can be really, really helpful. So sort of talking them through that process. I also like to have little games that you play. So, really simple pattern games that allow your dog to predict what's going to happen next. So, that, again, you're adding an element of predictability into a very uncertain situation. So, one of my favorite ones is called Look at That. And you literally point at something, you cue your dog, look at that, and then you mark and reward when they look at the thing. And the great thing about that is you don't have to practice it with the thing that your dog is then going to be freaked out by. So let's say your dog has never seen a cow before. You don't need to practice it around cows for it to be effective. So when I introduce the game, I tell people to get a bottle of water or, just something that's in your house that you can practice with so that your dog understands the mechanics of the game, and then you can translate it onto something that's new. So it just gives your dog that sense of predictability. So I would say if it kind of catches you off guard and you're walking through your countryside walk and you suddenly see a cow and your dog is either uncomfortable or they start barking, step one is always create space, so move them away so that they can then become in that frame of mind where they can take in new information. Because if they're actively barking and losing their mind and really freaked out, it's going to be difficult for things to sink in. So then the next time they see a sheep or a cow, you're going to get the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. If you can create some space and then introduce those pattern games, so just again, really simple. The other one you can do is just 1, 2, 3, which is you count 1, 2, 3 and give them a treat. And if you practice that beforehand, again, you don't need to have had any experience around livestock to then just go, okay, well, we've seen that. Now I'm going to use 1, 2, 3 to help my dog regulate themselves. And then once they're a little bit calmer, then we can let them look, understand that it's not a big scary thing. And again, when I say look, I do mean look. We are not going to be marching dogs up to sheep to smell them on the nose, nothing
Yeah.
like that. It's not about interacting with the thing, it's just giving them a chance to observe so that they can take in information and realize that it's not a threat to them. Obviously, some dogs will have that herding instinct that can be very difficult to deal with on the fly. I think if you have something you can redirect onto, like a toy or something else that you can get their focus with, that can be really helpful. And obviously, hopefully this goes without saying, but keeping them on a lead is always so important in those environments, even if you can't see livestock, but there are signs saying livestock grazing or there's any suspicion of livestock on that trail, just keep them on a lead. It's always better to be safe. You can obviously use a long line if you want to, but that's so important because your dog doesn't need to be biting or anything like that to be a threat. It can just be, even if they're stressing the animals out, that can obviously have really devastating consequences for those animals.
When I wrote up my notes for this episode, I don't know if you remember Fenton, who became a YouTube
Yes.
sensation. It was such a funny clip, and the way the guy was screaming Fenton after his dog was so funny. But of course, it was quite serious as well because the dog was massively out of control. I think it was in Richmond Park in London. And what I realized with that clip is that there are so many dogs where something switches in their head and they are off. Would you have been able to get Fenton back?
It's really difficult because you have to have set your dog up with specific skills for them to understand that it's even worth listening to you in that context. Because if you're, let's say your normal walk is you go to the dog park, you let your dog off the lead and you ignore your dog the whole time, they charge about and have a great time while you're on your phone. There's no history there of your dog feeling like you're worth paying attention to. So then when they go, that there's a deer over there and I'm going to chase them, there's absolutely no motivation for that dog to stop doing the really, really fun thing and come back to you. And equally, I think people's first response is to yell. I'm going to yell at my dog. I'm going to sound really angry and really stern. And that does the opposite, because why are they going to come back to you when it's really
Yeah.
fun to chase the deer and you sound like you're about to yell at them? I always say to people, if you want to be in those situations, you have to have like really solid foundations. And if you don't have those foundations, don't chance it. I think what I often see is when I work with people whose dogs will do these things, there's always a history of them not listening. It's not that it's come out of nowhere. It's a history of my dog won't recall when XYZ. But it's the really extreme things that tip people over into the point of, oh, well, maybe I need to get training because that was really embarrassing, or I couldn't deal with that situation. So I would always say it's about setting yourself and your dog up for success. Get in there early, teach them the skills that you need so that you're not then panicking. And yes, like things do happen, but we can still teach skills. We can teach things like an emergency recall so that if the worst case scenario happens and all of a sudden out of nowhere your dog is off lead, they normally recall, something's there that you're not expecting and they will not come back to you. You still have tools in your toolkit that can get their attention and get their focus. And again, teaching that as an emergency recall where you literally use the highest of high value every time and you save it for just you're getting the most amazing thing when you hear this word. Just things like that can really, really help in those situations.
Imagine people now standing in a park and shouting steak or something because they just
Yes.
have a steak in their pocket or something.
Yes, and it could be anything. Like, I think it's so funny because people always, I hear it all the time. They go, come here, come here, come here. And then they start going, what's this? What's this? And I'm like, and then the dog comes back. And so I always say, well, your recall cue at this point is what's this? So if you, and it doesn't have to, be a bad thing. You can just do it the same way. Even if your what's this is your emergency recall because it means something really great is happening. Something you can use to reinforce over and over and over again that when you hear this, you're going to get something great. It's only ever going to be good news for you. And that can be different. It could be food. It could be, for some dogs, it's I'm running away in the opposite direction with a toy waving around. That's super motivational for dogs that like to chase. So for my dogs, their emergency recall is a word. And normally I will say out. And then I'm running in the opposite direction with a tug toy trailing behind me. And that gets them real snappy.
Oh,
So
that's
that's a good
interesting.
one. Yes. Yeah, because, if they are having fun chasing, it
Yeah.
doesn't I always say to people, look at why a dog is doing something, and if you can give them that, then you've beat the system because you're not having to go, come and get this piece of chicken when the dog's going, oh, I just really want to chase things right now. You're saying, well, you can chase, come and chase this. And instead of trying to combat against their natural instincts, you start working with their instincts, and that's a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah. And I think that's also what I love about what you put on Instagram, Amelia, is that you are very playful with the dogs.
And I think, we know from the science now that punishment is very ineffective and it has so much fallout. So we look at things like if you are using punishment in your training, yes, it might suppress the behavior, but then you are at an increased risk of aggression or reactivity or other behavioral issues. And you can't get to the bottom of why something is happening with punishment. And that's what we really want to look at. And I think when we're dealing with serious behavioral issues, it can feel very heavy. And I think so many of those things can be solved when we have fun with our dogs and we connect with them. And, I when I would do one-to-ones in people's homes, people would always say, "Well, how come my dog listens to you and not me?" And I'm like, "Well, to be fair, I'm getting down on the floor and I'm letting your dog, play around, and we're doing rough play, and I'm getting all excited and I'm talking in my exciting voice." And I think that's just what dogs want, is to have fun with us, have a good time. And it also takes the weight off us as people, because it can feel very serious when you have a reactive dog and you're having to do all this heavy training. And it can sort of feel like a real uphill battle. And I think when you just let go of that pressure and start enjoying training and enjoying having fun with your dog, you're going to get faster results because your dog is having a good time, but also you're not going to feel this whole stress of, oh, well, I've got to do X, Y, Z, because it's really good for us as well. When you loosen your body, that has a real positive impact on humans, and movement for us is really, really good. So it helps dogs, but it helps us as well. And I think that's something that is really important to look at through training. So.
Yeah, I love that. There's one thing, and that's the beach zoomies. So after 6 o'clock, dogs are allowed on the beach, and you can literally see the dunes come alive with spaniel and Labrador terriers. That's all you see coming down to the beach. Um, and the dogs, for the most part, play with each other really nicely. But then eventually you start people getting quite nervous because the dogs are having too much fun. And I sometimes feel at the end of a beach walk, maybe we need to, I don't know, sit down and do downward facing dog together or something. What sort of setup when you take your dogs to the beach?
So I look at two things. So that how you finish the walk is excellent. And yes, finishing with a calming activity is great. But what we want to make sure is that when our dogs are having such a good time, again, adrenaline builds in their system. So when we look at what stress is not just a negative thing. Stress is any response to anything, right? It's just stress can be excitement, stress can be negative stress, it can be anxiety, but there's no chemical difference. So even if the dog's feeling really good about it, that adrenaline is still going to be rising and rising. And so when we let them off, they charge about, they do that zoomies, they're playing with all the other dogs, you're going to see that adrenaline continue to build and build and build and build. And with dogs, they find it really hard to metabolize adrenaline as quick as we do. So it takes them about 5 days to metabolize adrenaline.
Wow.
So what we want to make sure is that not only are we breaking that up in between, so rest days and things like that, but we also want to give them breaks throughout that same trip. So if my dog is zooming about having a great time, cool, that's great for them. What we don't want is that to then escalate into, well, now I'm playing with a dog and now I'm so over aroused that I'm going to start fighting with them, things like that. Really simple way. Again, that's where emergency recall can come into play, because again, they're probably going to go into a little bit of a tunnel vision, but we can let them have a nice time. We do our emergency recall or just our normal recall, whatever works. And then we just spend a bit of time bringing them back down, helping them to regulate. Food can be really effective in that situation because it helps to calm the brain, it helps to calm the body. It releases dopamine in their brain as well, which helps to calm them. So using food to break that up, even just scattering, I've got a handful of food, I'm going to scatter it and my dog's going to sniff around and find it. Then you've got food, but also sniffing, and sniffing also really helps to calm the brain. And then, then you can send them back in to do all those things they love. You can send them back out to play with their friends and things like that. But then what you're doing is, if you're giving them a break every, 5 minutes, say, instead of just that adrenaline building and building and building into an escalation point, you're helping them to sort of bring their excitement up, and then we bring it back down. And it just means that at the end of that walk, you don't have that constant escalation. And it means that the rest of your week is then not going to be full of just crazy behavior. So
Yeah.
helping them to regulate throughout the walk really helps, so that you're not taking away those fun things. You're not preventing them from doing the things that they love doing. You're just helping them to reset and be calmer in between so that it doesn't escalate. I always say to people, what you can look out for is, the full body shake that they do, where it looks like they're shaking off water. That's how dogs help to regulate themselves. It's almost like they're shaking the stress off. So
Oh,
what I'll do a lot of the time is if I've got two dogs playing or doing zoomies, we call them out, we have a bit of a calm down. Mine can do it on cue now, so I'll say, "Have a shake," they shake off, and then that tells me that they're in the right frame of mind to then go back in and enjoy themselves, so that's a nice, easy thing to look for as well.
I love that. As a last question,
Mhm.
tell me, what do you pack when you go on holidays with your dogs?
I try and take as much as possible that I would use in their day-to-day life. So again, if I can use their normal food, I will take that as much as possible. Mine are raw fed, so that can be a bit difficult, but I'll always look at the options so that, we're not then having stomach issues while being in a new place. I always look at taking spare leads and spare harnesses because you don't want to be away from home and then have a lead break or have a harness break and then you're stuck. So that's a really important thing to take with you. I will always try and pack a first aid kit because, again, if you're not near your normal vet and you don't have your normal things, it's really helpful to have that, especially if you're doing walks that you might not normally do. You're in places that you might not normally be in. You never know, what might happen. So that's a really important thing to take. My barrier is something that I really like to take with me. So my dog stopper, so that I know that, okay, if
Right.
there's a room my dog cannot go in for whatever reason, I can manage their environment wherever we are. For some people, if their dog normally sleeps in a crate, they might take a crate with them. Mine personally don't. I have one of my dogs has a travel crate. I'll take that because he sleeps in it, but I don't shut him in it. But their beds can be a really helpful thing to take. I know mine are all massive, so it takes up quite a fair amount of space, but that can be really helpful. And yeah, I think anything that just really is part of your normal routine. So enrichment toys is a good one. So like I'll take lick mats and Kongs that I can fill up. I have actually started taking cleaning stuff with me. So I think the last time I stayed in an Airbnb, I actually took a Hoover with me. And that's just because so often you go and stay at these dog friendly places and they're not actually set up for dogs. So it just helps to avoid any sort of hassle when you know that you can clean up after yourself and you're not having to worry.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
yes, and dog towels as well is a
Lots of
is a
them.
big one. Lots of dog towels because
Cool.
again, we don't want to get mud or sand or whatever they're rolling in everywhere. So that's a really important one too.
Thank you so much, Emilia. I really enjoyed
Yeah, of
that. And
course.
I hope you two have a fantastic summer.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great summer too.
So much from Amelia. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And just two more little things from me. Firstly, the heat wave doesn't end when you leave town. Sand can be very hot as well. So if in doubt, please leave your dog at home during the day and go to the beach in the evening. Secondly, not all dogs love to swim. I know it's this big idea, and you always see these Labradors and Retrievers running into the waves. Not every dog loves that. I put an article on Wonder Dog Substack on how to introduce your dog to water and how to teach them to swim. But don't forget, not every dog is an Olympian. Some of them are just born beach bums, and that's fine too. In the next episode, I will be speaking to Emma Slavinsky. She is the chief executive of the League Against Cruel Sports. And we have a long list of topics to discuss because this has been a big year already for campaigning. We're talking about greyhound racing and ending it, animal testing and ending it. We're also talking about foxhounds and the potential ban on fox hunting. And we're also talking about dog fighting, an issue that hasn't been discussed much this year, but it's sadly still happening. So I hope you join me again for this episode. To never miss a new post or a new podcast, please sign up to Wonderdog Substack, which is wonderdog.substack.com, where you can sign up either for free, or if you'd like to support my work, you can become a paying subscriber, which is £8 a month or £80 a year. And for that, you also get to access our chat community and you get access to the occasional exclusive Zoom events. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic start to your summer holidays, or if you're already on the way, I hope you have a great summer. Thank you so much for watching and for listening, and please cuddle your dogs for me. Goodbye.